Bob Mueller and his associates, the 18 angry Democrats, harmed actual American citizens during the course of developing their investigation and report against President Donald J. Trump and his campaign on Russia collusion and obstruction of justice. One of those citizens, Mr. Jerome Corsi, Harvard PhD, author, and American defender, is going to be with us today. So put those seatbelts on, strap those shoulders in. It's going to be a wild and woolly ride on the Rob Manus Show. Here we are, friends. The Mueller probe. No collusion, conspiracy with the Russians on the part of President Trump, his campaign, his family, or his associates, and Mueller couldn't or wouldn't reach a conclusion on obstruction by the president. In the report's aftermath, President Trump took the unusual step to empower Attorney General Barr to declassify any and all information, including in the intelligence community, that led to the investigation regarding the origins of the counterintelligence operation against him as a candidate and president. He has also invoked executive privilege on all executive branch witnesses being subpoenaed by Congress. The political climate in Washington is highly charged, and we're beginning to see citizens whose financial prospects and professional reputations have been gravely damaged by Mueller are pushing back in very serious ways. One of those citizens is Mr. Jerome Corsi. Corsi, who was questioned by the Mueller probe about his relationship with WikiLeaks, pushed back hard when Mueller's team attempted to get him to plead to lying to the FBI, and he won, quite frankly, because he insisted they were just being prosecutorial thugs wanting another conviction to use against President Trump, and the facts were on his side. Mr. Corsi has also weighed in on the U.S. indictment of Julian Assange, advising him to fight back hard and defend the truth with facts. In Real Clear Politics, he said this is another attack on journalism about Assange's arrest. In 2013, the Obama Justice Department decided not to indict Julian Assange over these Chelsea Manning issues because they said it would be tantamount to indicting the New York Times or the Washington Post. As a journalist, Assange has a right to publish even stolen materials, Corsi said. And I agree, especially after the revised indictments were issued against Assange for what appears to be routine journalist activity. Corsi also indicates that Assange can completely deflate the remaining Russia collusion attackers against Trump by getting a book into the public and showing the facts to back up his press conference statements that the Russians didn't give him the hacked DNC emails. We'll also get Mr. Corsi's views on the counterintelligence origins efforts and how we can get the facts out of the intel community without them being able to hide information behind classification walls. The attempt to take down first presidential candidate Trump and then President Trump is a much greater threat to the United States than any threat we faced in my more than 3 decades of military service. In fact, it's the only existential threat we've faced since the Soviet Union disintegrated. That is why all of us must come to America's defense now. We welcome Jerome Corsi, author, Harvard PhD, courageous investigative journalist, and defender of America, to the Rob Manus Show. Well, friends, today we welcome Dr. Jerome Corsi, author, Harvard PhD, defender of American ideas, and investigative journalist with a great amount of courage, to the Rob Manus Show. Dr. Corsi, thank you so much for coming on.
Ron, my pleasure. Thank you. Glad to be with you.
Well, we appreciate you being here, and just want to dive right into it with our experience type questions. Question number one, sir. I know that Mueller thought about charging you, wanted you to take a plea deal in the Trump Russia collusion investigation, the hoax that's been out there. talk to our viewers about that. How did that go down, and what were the specifics of these threats of charges that they had against you? And and why do you think that you were successful in staving that off?
Well, I mean, first of all, Mueller wanted me to testify. I got a subpoena on August 28th last year, and I ended up spending 40 hours with the Mueller special counselors, prosecutors in Washington. It took 2 months and was over 6 different sessions, and the whole experience was very grueling. I mean, they expected that I could connect the Trump campaign to Assange, and that they believed I had a contact with Assange that would complete their collusion theory by connecting the Trump campaign with Assange so they could coordinate when the Podesta emails would be released in October to do the most harm to Hillary Clinton's campaign. That was Mueller's theory. It wasn't true. I mean, I don't know Assange. I've never met Assange. I've never worked with Assange. I don't know anyone connected to Assange. And I by myself figured out in July and August 2016 that we had a 25th wedding anniversary. My wife and my family and I took a trip to Italy. I had some time, and I figured out that Assange had Podesta's emails. That's what he had left, and that he would release them in October, drip by drip, day by day. And I was right. On the the FBI intercepting all my emails, listening to all my phone calls, surveilling me, which I was not aware of at the time. They figured I had to have contact with Assange because I was so precisely correct in my guess or estimate or you know conclusions about what Assange had. At any rate, these 40 hours, the FBI picks you up in your hotel and they take you to an unmarked FBI building in Washington, D.C. You come in through the garage so no one in the street can photograph you or see you. Then you come into a safe room, you give up your cell phones and your computers, your laptops, everything. You have no electronics. You're escorted into a conference room in the interior of the building with no windows and no clock. And in come three of the prosecutors from the special counselor's team with 6 to 9 FBI, and they sit on one side of this conference table, and the other is me and my attorney, and they grill you for 6 or 8 hours. I had started out by wanting to cooperate with them. I provided them voluntarily my cell phones, my computers, everything. I gave them access to my email accounts. I had nothing to hide. But when I would not provide it because I didn't have a contact to Assange, and they looked and went and saw everybody I was working with in 2016 and 2017, the FBI's resources on the Mueller team were unlimited. Spent
Hmm.
millions of dollars investigating me. They finally blew it all up and said they were going to charge me with lying to them because the first day of testimony, and really throughout, I was having trouble remembering any of my emails from 2016, and they were tripping me up constantly saying, "Did you want to send anyone to see Assange?" Well, I had some emails in July 2016 where one of my friends in London, Ted Malik, who's an academic, Roger Stone, had asked, he wanted somebody to go see Assange, and I passed that email on to Ted Malik and said, "Go see Assange." Or basically, I just forwarded it and
Hmm.
said, "This is from Roger Stone." And then when I forgot that email, they said I was lying. Well, when they gave me this 3 or 4 page plea deal, I was going to have to go before a federal judge and swear that I committed these crimes. I knew I hadn't committed them because the crime is I did not knowingly and willfully give them information I knew to be false with the intent to mislead them on material matter. I just forgot a few emails. I amended that testimony.
Yeah.
So, we
So let me make sure I understand this right. You gave them your cell phones. You
yes,
gave them your computers, your emails, and your communications. Is that correct?
everything. Gave them
Everything.
everything. Right.
And because you had a memory problem in the actual deposition, they said you're lying. That's unbelievable. As a regular American that's never gone through this process, it just seems like it's a horrific uh, uh, misuse of power or abuse of power because they
Well,
know
that's
they are in the power position and they were surveilling you. Is that correct? How did they get
yeah.
surveillance on you?
Well,
How did they get surveillance?
I'm sure it was under the FISA court. They may have been surveilling me under the NSA back to 2004 when I co-authored Unfit for Command, book against John
Mm,
Kerry,
yeah,
Swift Boat book. And
yeah,
so,
could be.
this is I wrote a book on all this called Silent No More, in which I expose the Mueller team and of prosecutorial misconduct. And I've sued the special counselor Mueller by name and the team, as well as the NSA, in federal district court in Washington, D.C. for $350 million for prosecutorial misconduct on very issues you're talking about, on illegal electronic surveillance, possibly with the FISA court, and on leaking information to from the grand jury and other parts of my testimony to the press, which I believe the special prosecutors did. Mueller's team, I think, was completely corrupt. They began with they had already convicted Donald Trump of basically treason, working with Russia, and now they were looking for a crime. Didn't have a crime. That's why they thought my testimony was so critical. And when I could not connect Roger Stone to Assange because it never happened,
Hmm.
the special prosecutors became enraged, and they felt I was hiding the name from them, which never happened, and they couldn't prove otherwise. So not only did I reject their plea deal and told them to take a hike. Now, my wife said to me one day, she woke up there because they say, well, if you don't sign this plea deal and plead guilty to these charges, which will go before a judge and say you don't get any prison time, you cooperated with us, or we'll charge you with a series of crimes in Washington, D.C., where the jury and judge will hate you. We'll charge you with conspiracy to obstruct justice. We'll seek to put you in prison for 25 years. You'll spend $2 million defending yourself. Then you'll lose, ruin the whole family. That's your choice. Well, my wife woke up one morning. She said, she would rather spend the rest of her life visiting me in prison than have me not be the man she married. And that's really all I needed to know to conclude I could not go before a judge and swear before God that I had committed a crime I hadn't committed. Couldn't do it.
Well, I agree,
So,
Dr. Corsi. I would have I would not go before a judge and admit to a crime that I had not committed. I applaud you and your wife for standing up to these people because our liberties are really under attack in this country, and it's not by people from outside the country; it's by our own government and our own politicians. And people are very concerned about it, and that gets me to the second thing I wanted to ask you about. And congratulations on beating these thugs.
and
I
they
think
never
they're just
charged me with
thugs,
anything.
by the way. Yeah,
Mueller concluded, and I was never charged with anything. I mean, they were trying to get
exactly.
me. The only way they were going to put me in prison was if they scared me so much that I
Hmm.
agreed to plead the crime I hadn't committed in order to stay out of prison. I told them, go ahead and put me in prison the rest of my life. That's where justice has gone to, where you criminals give me a criminal deal to stay out of jail. I'm going to tell the world that you've done it, which is why I wrote this book, Silent No More. I went on the media, told the world about it. I was on Hannity's show. I was on many different shows on Fox. I was on MSNBC, CNN. I really went out there to Trish Reagan was extremely helpful on Fox Business. I really went out there and told the American people what Mueller had done and why I thought it was fraudulent. I think my case was one of the reasons the Mueller investigation ended because I went public exposing the fraud. I was the only one who resisted them. Said, I won't sign your plea deal. I tell you to take a hike, and I'm going to go public and expose you. And if you want to charge me with a crime, which they did not do, I'll fight it in court.
Well, we think it's fabulous because unless American citizens like you stand up and push back on this type of activity, our rights will and our liberties will continue to shrink, and the government will continue to grow, no matter who we elect to office, no matter what type of activism we're involved in. And you mentioned your book, "Silent No More," sir, and that takes me to my second question, and it's about Julian Assange. I just would like to get your thoughts on what you think about the indictment and the attempts to extradite him. What's your view of this indictment by the United States of America of a publisher of information that happened to be classified? It just really bothers me and bothers my viewers that we are having to stand up and defend the rights that are laid out in the Bill of Rights and the rights that aren't constantly against our government. And it's the same types of prosecutors that are going after Assange that were going after you, really.
The deep state is still very entrenched in the Department of Justice and the intelligence agencies. These are globalists by ideology. They're, don't value the United States any longer. They want governments to control everything and international governments. That the Democratic Party is very much aligned with these values. At any rate, I did my doctoral dissertation at Harvard in 1972 on the Pentagon Papers case and the 1917 Espionage Act. The paper was it was my doctoral dissertation in political science at Harvard, and it was on prior restraint and prior punishment and political dissent. Now, it applies to Assange. I mean, I wrote that in 1972, and it's really relevant today. The Assange, first of all, the government has charged Assange with two indictments, and neither one of these indictments have anything to do with the 2016 election or with Russia. They have nothing to do whatsoever with the stealing of the Democrats' emails and publishing them during the 2016 campaign. They don't have anything to do with President Trump. They have to do with the 2010 incidents and theft of classified documents by Bradley Manning, who's now Chelsea Manning, who was indicted for stealing these documents and court-martialed, and was in the U.S. military when these documents were stolen. The first indictment charged that Julian Assange had assisted Bradley Manning to try to crack a password in order to get more documents, but the indictment makes it very clear that Assange never did crack the password. So he's charged with maybe trying to, but all the documents that WikiLeaks published in 2010 were stolen by Chelsea Manning or Bradley Manning without the assistance of any assistance at all in the theft by WikiLeaks or Julian Assange. Then the second indictment is under the Espionage Act, and it's charging Assange with publishing the documents because they contain government state secrets, which are considered to be in that narrow category that the government can make criminal to publish. See, the Pentagon Papers case in 1971 established the New York Times and the Washington Post were allowed, under the First Amendment, to publish this classified study that had been done by the Pentagon starting in the early years of the war, which showed that Robert McNamara and President Lyndon Johnson, in the first months of the ramp up of the war in 1963 after Jack Kennedy was assassinated, knew almost from the beginning that the way we were fighting the Vietnam War, we couldn't win. And there was really an insurgency that really was not anything to do with this domino theory or the expansion of communism from Russia or China. It was really a regional conflict in Vietnam that had been going on since the end of World War II. The French had also lost in Dien Bien Phu in 1954 and pulled out of Indochina, which is Vietnam. And so this study was extremely damaging, politically damaging to both Democrats and Republicans. Richard Nixon was then in power, still fighting the Vietnam War. The government wanted to prohibit its being published. The Supreme Court said no, it could be published. I think the government's got a very weak case against Assange because it's got a very high threshold to show that Assange actually stole any documents. The stealing of the documents may be a crime. Daniel Ellsberg who stole the Pentagon Papers did go to prison for doing so. But the papers were not charged. And in 2013, the Obama Department of Justice passed on bringing criminal charges against WikiLeaks or Assange for publishing the documents that Chelsea Manning stole. And they did so on the premise that if they charged WikiLeaks with publication, they're also going to have to charge the New York Times and the Washington Post and everybody else in 2010 who published the Chelsea Manning secrets after they were revealed by WikiLeaks. See, the key principle here is that unless the documents are, really can be proven that they released information, like if you had the details of the D-Day invasion and you wanted to publish them in the newspaper a week before the invasion, well, that could probably be prohibited. But to publish information even on Afghanistan or Iraq, or the information on cables that was published in the Chelsea Manning's papers, while they may be damaging and embarrassing to the U.S. government, the government's going to have to prove that people actually died because there was secret information about actionable intelligence officers who were in the field at the time or military in the field. And I'm not sure the government can meet that threshold. So I think
I
the
agree with you,
government's
Dr.
got a
Corsi.
I think the government's got a very weak case.
I think they do have a very weak case, and I also find it very, very
the
strange that
cat was about to come on camera. I had to push the cat away.
that's why,
Cat wants to come on camera. The cat may just do it eventually.
that's all right. We like cats around here, but
Well, I like cats around here.
we you know, it's strange that the New York Times, the CNNs of the world, all those that have had the advantages of the anonymous sources, leakers, and the leakers also are not pushing back on this. They seem to be rallying
There's the
around. Yeah,
cat.
it's Assange. Let's get him. And
I'll show you
and
Assange. Here's Assange right here. You see, that's Assange. Assange is kind of camera shy. Doesn't like to be held very much. That's Assange right there. He just got away.
And I think the real Julian Assange is going to get away because I agree with you. I think they've got a pretty darn weak case.
I think there's a case that should alarm even Donald Trump, and Donald Trump should, I think, realize that Assange is holding the basic get out of jail free card, because Assange has maintained repeatedly in interviews that he can prove the Russians did not steal the Democrats' emails in 2016, and he's hinted that it was the Seth Rich, who was an employee, Democratic National Party in Washington, Democratic National Committee, who was killed suspiciously during the 2016 campaign. And what Assange has hinted in various interviews is that it was Seth Rich who stole the emails as an inside job. I think the intelligence assessment that people like CIA Director Brennan and others have been relying upon, Director of National Intelligence Clapper, to say that it was Russia, is a terribly political document produced by the intelligence agencies under Brennan and Clapper, who were weaponized into political operatives to intervene in our politics to elect Hillary Clinton. And the genesis of that intelligence assessment goes back to a group that was created by the Democrats, a cybersecurity firm called CrowdStrike, I believe it is, or Crowd something or other. Yeah, that is funded and created by Eric Schmidt, who was one of the was CEO of Google, multi-millionaire billionaire, and they created this company. And Julian Assange also released information from the CIA, which shows the CIA is capable of hacking data and putting in the metadata that makes it look like Russia had done it. So there's Cozy Bear and Fuzzy Bear and all these other metadata clues that were pointed to by CrowdStrike to say it was Russia, I think could easily have been the CIA planting those signals into the computer metadata, so to make it look like Russia. And the DNC has not released that computer that server for independent analysis, the one from which the Podesta emails in part came, and the
Hmm.
emails that were released on Debbie Wasserman Schultz in July 2016 by Assange. So I think Assange is really one who can do a lot of damage. It'll be the second whammy. First whammy was when the Mueller Commission, after trying desperately, trying to force people like me to lie in order to stay out of prison, that's what they basically were giving me as my choice here. I just refused to play their game and
Yeah.
got away with it because I didn't do anything wrong. At any rate, uh, Mueller was forced to conclude that there was no Russian collusion because it was all a hoax from the beginning. And Assange can now say not only was there no Russian collusion, the Russians didn't even steal the emails, which will expose that our entire security apparatus, the CIA, the DOJ, the various intelligence agencies, the FBI, were all politicized and weaponized under Obama and Hillary Clinton. And I think this was a coup d'etat. And it's ultimately going to be shown to have been involving when I wrote another book called Killing the Deep State. That book is still doing very well. I published that in 2017. And in that book, I predicted basically that this was a coup d'etat, and that ultimately, after Mueller was discredited, that it would take another year or 2 years to get to justice the coup d'etat criminals, and we know many of them exposed by congressional investigations, including I think it's going to be James Comey. I think Loretta Lynch is at risk. I think it goes all the way up to the White House staff, Valerie Jarrett, uh, uh, President Trump himself, I think Hillary Clinton, John Podesta. It's a whole series who were in on this, in addition to operatives in the FBI and DOJ like Andrew McCabe and this Peter Strzok and this Lisa Page, who have these emails. There's a whole list of them. And
Yes,
many
there
of them have
are.
been
And
fired, but I think they're going to be brought to justice. At least I think the American people deserve that these people be brought to justice.
I agree with you. And I think that the facts will lead to the conspirators. Uh, I'm sure that it goes at least up to Vice President Biden because Biden was in the deputies meetings from shortly after they started on the Russia cyber crisis, is what they called it. And Comey, Clapper, Lynch, Rice, Susan Rice, and Brennan were the key players in the initial meetings, and then Biden joined later. So that in the executive branch decision making, the deputies meetings make a lot of decisions, and then the president gets briefed. Or for something that they think the president needs to make the decision on, they go directly to the president with their recommendations. So that
Yeah,
small group, I believe, is where the conspiracy lays. And I've been looking at this for quite some time. Washington Post, has written an article detailing that information. We know that Barr in his testimony said he was getting answers that didn't fit what needed to be answers that takes us to the right place. And one of those answers that he was not getting was why the deputies meetings stopped recording their meetings and turned the video off whenever they were meeting in the situation room. And that's a highly unusual step, and we need to get all of these folks into depositions under grand jury investigation and really get to the facts. And that leads me to my last question, sir, and that is, what are your thoughts on? I think it was a good move, but I'm interested and curious of what you think about the president giving authority to Attorney General Barr to declassify all information that has been recorded that led up to the origins of the counterintelligence investigation against his campaign first and then his presidency next, and even the intelligence community information. Because you mentioned that ICA on Russia meddling. I targeted that immediately when I saw it. I worked in the intelligence community as an executive and as an operator, and there was no evidence that was in the unclassified role to support any of those assessments in that ICA on the Russia election meddling. And that is very unusual that they wouldn't put some bits of classified information evidence to support their conclusions in a report like that.
Well, and I like going back to the previous subjects. I want to there was that one I guess text message by Lisa Page, which I think was in the Inspector General Horowitz's first report, in which she said that she was telling Peter Strzok that President Trump wanted to know every detail of what they were doing. So I don't imagine this was just at the deputies level. I think this went right up into Obama. And I think when it came time for Susan Rice and the others to be unmasking names to reveal them to the press, that President Trump and Hillary Clinton were both in on that. I think that's what's going to be proven. They were both sharing. I think the two, Hillary and Obama, had a plan that Hillary was going to be elected. This was going to complete his fundamental change to bring America into a socialist country, and Hillary was aboard with that. And this was their last step to make sure she got elected. Now, in terms of your question about what President Trump has done in giving the authority, first of all, telling the intelligence agencies, and I'm assuming also the FBI and the Department of Justice, to turn over any documents they have with regard to the new question that's on the table. And Attorney General Barr, you're correct, has affirmed that it's on the table. What caused the Russian collusion hoax in the first place? I want to get to the bottom of the Steele dossier and why this was used for the FISA court, where electronic surveillance authorizations that was granted 4 times to Comey and the others who were in, I think, on this conspiracy. So, first of all, I think President Trump was very clever and smart to give the authority to Attorney General Barr, so that it's not President Trump making the decisions on declassification. That really ought to be delegated. And as Attorney General, I think Barr is in an appropriate place to consider the relevant statutes in terms of national security and other considerations, to know what can be declassified and what should not be declassified, and try to reduce the redactions to a minimum. But I think when we get a hold of these documents, the American people are going to be shocked, because the prelude to them come in things like the Nunes memo, which was released now months ago, maybe a couple of years ago, actually, and various other documents from the House Intelligence Committee when it was under Republican control, or the House Judiciary Committee under Republican control. The same in the Senate. The Intelligence and the Judiciary Committees are doing a good job to get a lot of information out there. And we have a lot of information already that has been released, including some of the closed door testimony of various of these key actors, which are now public. And we're going to get more. And as this information comes out, I think the American public, if Attorney General Barr is going to do the job he was appointed to do, and that is to restore confidence of the American public in our justice system, then he's going to have indictments. He's going to have to get to the bottom of what, and I wrote in Killing the Deep State that it would take till the end of President Trump's first term to accomplish this. But I think by the end, Biden is not going to be running for president. He's going to be having an attorney defending himself on this criminal conspiracy and his role in it. The same with all those who attended that meeting where Susan Rice and the others at the end of the Obama presidency wrote a cover memo where they were saying they were going to do everything by the book. Well, everybody in the room that agreed to that was probably in on the conspiracy at a top level. And I think it's going to be uncovered step by step.
I agree. And Dr. Corsi, we all have our detractors out there, but you've been right on these things. If people go back and read what you've written and what you've spoken about these issues, you've been absolutely right on target. And that should get the naysayers to really focus in on the facts that are coming to light. And I also think you're right on the declassification. It's going to take a couple of years. I expect, from my professional opinion, that the intelligence community assessment on Russia meddling is going to be shown to, at a minimum, have used parts of the Steele dossier which we are seeing now appear to have been a Russian disinformation campaign that was planted using opposition research and their guy Christopher Steele to try to get that information out, and funded by the DNC and the Clinton campaign, by the way. So it's going to come full circle. The information's going to have to come out in order to restore the American people's confidence in the Department of Justice. And I think you're right.
Well,
The
and
president made
also
a brilliant move.
let me comment also. I mean, I think if you take a look at the few indictments that were made by Mueller of Russians, and there were two separate indictments naming some Russian companies and some Russian individuals who were said to have posted on social media during the election. That's what they did to influence the campaign. And if you look at when those announcements were announced, Rod Rosenstein in each of them, who was then Deputy Attorney General, who was supervising the Mueller investigation, said that neither of these indictments involved any proof or anything alleged that Russia had actually influenced the election. So all that Russia did, it appears to be, was they did a lot of posting on social media. Well, everybody in the world was posting on social media, and the idea that any Russian posting had any impact when there were millions of posts on that election is preposterous. And these people will never come to the United States to face trial. The Russians were named in the indictment. I think the whole thing was a show indictment that again exposes the fact that Mueller had nothing. They can't prove Russian collusion influenced the election. They can't prove that Trump was involved in Russian collusion. That's now dead. That's done. And I think with Assange, we can prove that the Russians did not even steal the emails that were material in this campaign, but they came from within Hillary's own campaign, within the Democratic Party itself, by a campaign worker who was disillusioned with the Hillary campaign. And the Democrats are going to be at the heart. The Democrats are going to be the criminals they were looking for.
I think we're sure going to find out the facts, and Assange is a key. Barr's ability to declassify is a key. And we do thank you very much, Dr. Corsi, for being with us today to walk us through what you've seen from your experience on this prosecutorial misconduct, the attack basically on it, virtually on the rights of every American citizen by our own government, and how we can get out of this mess by restoring confidence in the Department of Justice of the American people. Thank you very much, sir, and have a great day.
Great. Thank you. My great pleasure to be with you.
Folks, we'd like to thank Dr. Corsi for being with us today to shed more reality, truth, and facts on the mess that has become the counterintelligence investigation against a presidential campaign and a sitting blah, 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 blah.
No worries.
Well, folks, we'd like to thank Dr. Corsi for being with us today to shed some light with truth, facts, and reality into the mess that is the counterintelligence operation and investigation into presidential candidate Donald Trump and the duly constitutionally elected President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Dr. Corsi, it's been a pleasure being with you. And ladies and gentlemen, that's it for us today. Join us next week on The Rob Mena Show.